Hey everyone, welcome. Happy full moon, many blessings as we are tiptoeing through this portal. Some of us are tiptoeing perhaps, maybe some of us are on that fast track wherever you're at from the 1212 portal when it opened. I'm going to go through the little stepping stones. These are opportunities. 1212, full moon, winter solstice, and then into obviously the new year. But this 1212 portal, the energies are going to take us through mid to end January. So the way that I've been talking about it, we did a group call, a live group call on Friday evening, which was Friday the 13th, which is all about the feminine and the natural feminine cycles and natural cycles of life. Um, the way that I'm talking about this is that each of these dates through this portal are opportunities to take the next step into your highest alignment. We're always moving into higher alignments, always, if we choose. So these are really great, potent moments, right? Potent windows of time where we can keep refining and redefining how and what and the expression that we want to be giving for and to our soul hearts or our heart soul's communication. So on this note, I want to talk about your path. I want to talk about the spiritual path. And how do you define your spiritual path? What does that mean for you? Everybody's definition is going to be very different. And what we have these days is what I'm calling this spiritual smorgasbord. So last night I was up in the middle of the night, and the moon, that moon is almost full, and it was just, I opened up my blinds and I was just getting a moon bath, and I was just asking the divine and all of my guides and my highest self, what is it that we need to know about our path? Because we have so many choices now. And back in the day, I will say even back 20 or 30 years ago, as recent as that, spirituality was much more narrowly defined. And it was God-centered or goddess-centered, but primarily more God-centered, right? Not just within a religious context, but within spirituality meant that I was in some kind of relationship to this higher force of benevolence and love and wisdom. And then it was also, held within containers that were age old. So yes, there are the religious containers. There is the exoteric religious, which is the outer religion, where you go out to church and you're part of that community and you're receiving information or perceptions from a minister or a priest and out of the Bible directly. That's the exoteric, right? This could be within Judaism, with the Old Testament and their texts. Primarily in the West, this is what we're working with, but there are obviously others. And then there is the esoteric, the inner, the mystical traditions. And those have been less known, less talked about. But even those had container and contexts in which spirituality was defined as being within these parameters, right? Anything that was outside of that, energy work, channeling, all of these other things, crystals, tarot, all of that was sort of deemed new age, right? Or woo-woo. So there was a level of discounting to that simply because we hadn't actually, on the collective consciousness, hadn't quite opened up to the subtle realms. So now what we have is everything has been activated because we are evolving as spiritual beings. So we've got many methods of divination, right? Pendulums, crystals, tarot. We have crystals, we have energy work, we have energy reading. We've got plenty of mediumship and channeling. We've got connection, deeper roots spiritually to the earth and to the, what is the word I'm looking for? The earth realms, let's just say that. And then we've opened up multidimensionally. We now are recognizing that everything goes quantum. So spirituality has expanded in what it means. And yet there are truths within the ancient traditions that span through time, that span through eons, that can get lost because they are foundational understandings of consciousness that can get lost and diluted within the myriad, the plethora, the smorgasbord of choices that we have. So, so I think that it is a shortcoming in some ways now where we're at to deem one path is the path. It is the way, right? Traditionally, this has really been thought to be true for the more masculine traditions. And most of any religious, regardless of the culture, and I'll just say in Christianity in the West and in, the Eastern philosophies, whether it be Buddhism, whether it be within the yogic traditions, they still carried more of that masculine way of operating and that bent. And I will say that the more popularized, the more common paths were that. And there tends to be a way within that masculine consciousness that there is only one way. And this is the only experience that you should be having. If you're not following that, or if you're paying attention to any other experiences, then somehow that's discounted and minimized because this is the way. So, right, there are yogic traditions that do that, just as there are Christian traditions that do that. And what we have now is we're recognizing that our connection is much broader. And the divine expressions are manyfold. And that to limit ourselves to only one way is to keep ourselves boxed in, and it keeps us disconnected from the deep complexities of an awakening journey, the deep complexities of our soul nature, and the vast evolutionary process that is happening that requires us to go beyond the tradition thresholds. So that's one, that's one side of this coin, that it can be too narrow, and we can be, tethered to limiting who we are and what we're here to evolve into and how we are to experience all of life. So the flip side of that is what we have these days, which is the smorgasbord, where we can go out and we can experience so many things. And in that experience, it literally is like we've got this smorgasbord laid out in front of us. And if anybody remembers smorgasbords, I don't even know if there are smorgasbords anymore. But if you've been to smorgasbords, right, it usually is not the healthiest food, number one. And, in general, restaurant food is not the healthiest food unless they have a specific intentionality behind it. And at smorgasbords, right, eat all you want. And you can go back again and again and get this and get that and get that and get that. And then if you remember, there were certain things probably that you didn't have very often, and maybe like a plenty of desserts that we hardly ever got to choose from. So we get that dessert and that dessert. Oh, I want more potatoes. Oh, I want more gravy, right? And then by the end of the experience, we just were really full and probably didn't feel really great. And our digestion of everything that we had eaten was sluggish, right? And the assimilation of all of that was kind of a mishmash because the food is not that healthy. And because now that we've overeaten, our our digestive juices are working on overtime, and so all of this stuff really inhibits the deepening and the true essence of the joy of options. So what we have is a smorgasbord. And if we aren't connected to what is my path, how do I know what my path is? We're hip hopping from many, many different things, experience after experience after experience. Back in, the older traditions, the advice was always dig one well and dig it deep until you get to the water. If you're hopping, digging well over here, and well over here, and being dissatisfied or not feeling like you're reaping a deeper transformational experience, then you haven't stuck with one well long enough to dig down into those waters. And that has sort of gone by the wayside, I think, that understanding, that knowing, because now the collective consciousness has become very inundated and scattered and distracted by all of the experiences that we can have, all of the information coming to us. We're inundated. So this is a great thing when we use it consciously and with a level of presence and intentionality. And when we don't, we just get lost in a sea of more confusion and distanced from our own center. So I will say, in the very beginning for myself, for sure, my light is going again. When I first went through my waking up in 1996, there weren't hardly any choices. And I wasn't really attuned to that anyway. So, my connection up to that point with God was through AA as this higher power. And I was still grappling with what that really meant for me. And then I went through this awakening period, and my first bout of that, and the way that it was for me is it was a very internal process, which took me very deep inside to my intuition. And because there wasn't a lot of things to choose from, there wasn't the internet that we could get on and look and study, I had the blessing, and I feel very much that this was a blessing. I had the blessing of honing my intuition and following that. And that intuition, my soul, I became deeply connected to what I called my soul song. Right? That's the way that I would talk about the guidance of my soul, because I would hear it, I would understand it. It would lead me. So my soul song would take me to experience this. So I spent a year doing energy work and working with chakras. I spent probably 2 years doing herbalism and wild crafting and going out and harvesting and making beautiful concoctions that I loved, right? And then I spent another, well, let's just say forever after that, working with hands-on healing, just simply because it flowed through me naturally. I wasn't seeking it. It came upon me when it was ready. And so then eventually, 10 years after that, I got went through my Reiki levels and became a Reiki master. And then I found the traditional path of yoga. However, not the exoteric at all. I didn't go to yoga in the studios, except for the very brief moment. I didn't go into public places. My path was the feminine Shakti tradition, and it was all guided from within, through my guru, through deities, through my own highest self, even though I didn't have the language for a lot of this. I didn't understand what was happening to my consciousness. I didn't understand what was happening within my sacred technology that is the body. But I rode the waves of the deeper wisdom that was transforming me. And then almost 10 years later, probably, when I started speaking light language, my whole construct began to shift. And I saw how I was held on to this Eastern tradition and that this was the way, right? Particularly for me, and that the ascension process, oh my gosh, that just sort of rocked my world a little bit. It took me a while to open up to that. And then once I opened up to that, I'm going to see if I can, there we go, even though my clothes are in the background. Even though I started to really recognize that it was all the same thing, right? My path was evolving, and it was evolving through a next awakening of our world. And so I was able to follow that and trust that, because I was able to follow and trust everything that had come before. And I was very clear of who I had been in the beginning and the transformations and the deepening of my soul presence and divine connection as I went. And I knew what my purpose was. And I don't mean my purpose in the world. I don't mean, my service. I mean, I knew why I was on this path. I knew what I was seeking. And that knowing only deepened. And so my question for any of you watching who are resonating with this is, what is your why? What is it that calls you? Now, there's going to be a very basic answer because we're all waking up, right? That's why. It's very simple in that way. We're all waking up. And as we wake up, we move out into all of these things that expand our consciousness and shake us free of the old paradigms. And so as we do this, that is part of the why in the beginning. But at some point, there has to be, doesn't have to be, but in order to truly reap the benefits of our maturation and our deep level healing and transformation, where we literally move from stages and phases of consciousness into next levels, we need to know what this is for us inside. What is this outside? If I'm drawn to tarot or if I'm drawn to channeling, what is that value for me that transforms me? How am I learning inside more about who I am, my connection to whatever the divine is for you? Am I getting more rooted into my own being? Am I accessing deeper layers of love, of self-love and unconditional love, higher love, impersonal love? Am I recognizing that the distractions of the external world is keeping me from the true essence of what spirituality is about, and that is know thyself inwardly. Know our God self. Know that spark of our divinity. Developing the faith and trust that when we can surrender to something that is much higher, to the divine, to God, to life, to our own soul presence, right? That when we do that, we surrender inside. We don't need all of the information that is outside. Because in actuality, when we aren't choosing consciously, when we aren't remaining connected or gaining a deeper connection into our center, deeper grounding, deeper peace, deeper embodiment, then we're just doing actions. And what you might recognize as I talk about this is I have a much more purist view of spirituality. And while that is true, I do understand that there are phases and stages that we all go through this process. And what I have learned through the masters, through my own experience, through working with others, through teachers that I have followed, I've watched an evolutionary process take place that is founded on landing inside of ourselves and at some point discerning the nutrition that I'm going to take in. I'm not going to eat too much, right? I'm going to be mindful where I get my food. I'm going to make sure, this is always a hard one for me, both metaphorically and physically, I'm going to chew my food again and again and again. That same bite, right? I'm not going to rush on to the next. I'm going to chew it. I'm going to swallow it. I'm going to breathe. And I'm going to remain present with the nutrients that it is bringing to me, the consciousness that I am ingesting. Does it resonate? Is my soul saying yes? Is my soul being enlivened? Is my wisdom being deepened? Am I having to learn to do the deeper things, to be uncomfortable, to look deeper at that shadow, right? That is part and parcel of this process. Am I then able to move into the world not just in peace or calm or relaxed for, an hour or two, or maybe even the day, and then I'm back into, oh my gosh, I've got to go and do my yoga again, do my meditation again. Hear me out. I'm not saying as a deeper practice. I'm saying that yes, we go and we do these things again, but over time, they aren't a need, because we've learned how to self-source that state of being from within us for longer periods of time. We become those states of being. Otherwise, we're just doing. Okay? So the invitation as we move through each of these, stepping stones is, where are you in your path now? How long have you been exploring your spirituality? How long have you been practicing your yoga or your meditation, right? Which, yes, we want that. Or have you not quite started yet, but you're feeling like maybe it's time? Awesome, right? We all need to celebrate where we're at, because there's a full range. However, I'm speaking mostly to those of you who are consciously on this journey, choosing something deeper and more expansive and transformational within you. And you might be kind of like, the collective wave, the collective consciousness is about going out. That is the 3D duality, right? Oh, I want to experience that. I want to experience that. That is the collective consciousness. You will always be swept up in the collective consciousness until we anchor inside and know our own consciousness. And that then allows us to know our truth and know our path and know the deeper reasons why we're doing what we're doing. So for me, I will just say, and I think it's because I started with very traditional, deep, long lineages. For me, it was always love and peace. I wanted to become peace, just like St. Francis would talk about. God, make me an instrument of your peace. I wanted to become peace, and I wasn't very peaceful. I wanted to become love, and I wasn't always very loving, right? And I wanted to be in divine service to God. to life, to love, right? I have a different relationship to each like kind of fractaled aspect of what to me is God. That's my why. Divine service to God, to his love, grace. And I say his. It really, for me, it's a mother, father, God. Divine source. It's all of it. Love, grace, life, light, and life. Deep peace, and may I serve. And then my dharma is to bring people back in to their center. That is my lived purpose, right? My service is helping people to understand the importance and the profundity and the blessings and the empowerment of learning to live internally from the inside out in deep reverence and connection to the sacredness of life. So your why might be very different. But it's important to understand that, because then that helps you to understand, yeah, that's interesting, but that's not my well, right? And then what you're doing is you're following your soul's guidance rather than being swept up in the sea of the collective consciousness. You know your own consciousness. And that is very empowering. And that is where we enter into knowing our true essence as a reflection of divine source. Experiences without honing your higher truth are just going to be experiences. So that's your invitation. And you know, what do I want to say last? I feel like there's, our journeys are magical, and there is no right or wrong journey. You each will find your way if you keep moving. And our journeys can take longer sometimes. They can be, they can be more ungrounded. They can be an entertainment for us, and that all will be a part of your perfect journey. Eventually, we're all moving to the same place. And my role, really is just to keep sharing an efficient way, the way of the richness that has been known for millennia. And that richness never changes because the core truths never change. And that reality of life and our essence and the way to that essence is always present. So with that, have an amazing full moon. There is a full moon meditation and light language activation, and I will put the link for that down below in the description box. I would love if this resonates with you. Please subscribe, of course, to my channel, and I will see you again before winter solstice. And blessings and much love.